A former New York City police officer has been convicted of assaulting law enforcement outside the U.S. Capitol on January 6th. 56-year-old Thomas Webster is the first of more than 100 alleged Capitol rioters to be tried on an assault charge. He claims he acted in self-defense when he hit a D.C. police officer with an aluminum flagpole. Webster faces up to 20 years in prison. He'll be sentenced in September. For more, let's bring in CBS News congressional correspondent Scott MacFarlane. He's been covering this story. Scott, House Select Committee members expanded their investigation Monday to include more of their own House colleagues. Tell us why.
They expanded it in a big way, seeking voluntary interviews with 3 House Republicans of note. Ronny Jackson, the first-term Republican from Texas who once served as former President Trump's White House physician and whose name surfaced in alleged messages sent by accused Oath Keeper conspirators on January 6th, messages expressing concern about Jackson's safety during the riot. Jackson says he doesn't know who sent those messages, is not interested, and will not participate in the investigation. Also, Arizona Republican Andy Biggs and Alabama Republican Mo Brooks both asked to come in for interviews, and both have just said they will not, saying the committee's investigation is a Democratic witch hunt or something to that effect. They're not participating, but the committee, in asking for their interviews, also lays down a marker, saying that it has concerns that some members of Congress, some of their own colleagues, have information that is vital to this investigation. But it's also a sign, Elaine, that they're still doing intake, still digging new holes, even though they're planning for an end game. 8 to 9 public hearings are planned by this committee beginning June 9th. So they have to finish their work within some reasonable time frame with the deadlines looming.
It is a bipartisan committee, just as a reminder to viewers. On Sunday, on Face the Nation, Republican Adam Kinzinger discussed the possibility of former Vice President Mike Pence speaking to the January 6th committee. What did he have to say about that, and what information would the committee want to hear from Mr. Pence?
Congressman Kinzinger, who is one of 2 Republicans on this 9-person committee, says a decision could be made, a tactical strategy could be made within the next week about what to do with Vice President Pence, whether to try to speak to him at length about what he heard from Donald Trump on January 6th and what other planning he's privy to. That being said, Elaine, we've heard from other January 6th committee members who say they've learned so much in their investigation, but the people who were in Mike Pence's ear that day, they may not need an interview with Mike Pence, which is such a provocative ask, to ask a former vice president to sit with a congressional committee investigating, among other things, his former boss. So it may be moot, it may be something the committee still pursues, but just like all other threads in this investigation, Elaine, time is running short to pull on it. Again, they have weeks until their public hearings. They know they've got to finish their work by the midterm elections, so time is running short.
Well, earlier, you spoke with another member of the committee, Democrat Elaine Luria of Virginia, about why the panel needs to call new witnesses. What more can you tell us about that?
It's like a contagion for this committee. The more interviews they do, the more it spreads and the more they need. They're yielding a lot of new tips from each interview. They've spoken to actual criminal defendants, accused rioters. They've spoken to White House staff, congressional staff, members of Congress, and the web is growing larger. And she explains why it may grow larger still.
And finally, Scott,
as we gather information, it leads us to more information. And I think that there's a very clear picture of the violence that happened on the day of January 6th, but all the contributing factors. And as we learn more people who had direct involvement, we're uncovering more things. But we've been about a year that we've been undertaking this investigation, and we feel like it's very important to share that work with the American public.
And Elaine, they've already done 900 plus depositions, but clearly there are more to come.
Finally, on Friday, Mark Meadows' legal team asked the federal court in Washington to reject the January 6th committee's request for Meadows to comply with its subpoenas. What additional information is the committee requesting from Meadows, who was former President Trump's chief of staff?
It seems clear they want hundreds more of Mark Meadows' text messages, and they want to talk to him some more about what type of planning went in ahead of January 6th to blocking the Electoral College count, and what communications Meadows had with members of Congress and key figures in the Trump world. He's already voluntarily handed over hundreds of those messages, some of which had striking conversations with Donald Trump Jr., with Sean Hannity, with Congressman Jim Jordan, talking about how to respond to January 6th or how to get ready for it. If that's what they've seen voluntarily from Mark Meadows, they're quite intrigued by what he might be withholding still. So they're in court, he's in court, they're battling it out with that same clock running in the background.
All right, Scott MacFarlane covering all the threads of this expansive investigation. Thank you so much, Scott.